Hey K-popers, and welcome back to Hallyu. For our first deep dive of 2022, I'm taking a closer look at the enigma that is YG Entertainment. Something definitely seems off with the label in recent times, and so we're going to take a look at each of their artists' recent activities to see what the situation really is like. Then we'll look further back into the past to see some of the patterns that are resurfacing with their newer artists, and finally I'll offer 3 personal theories of mine as to what might be going down within those 4 walls. Before we get started, I want to quickly thank Hallyu's honorary producers. If you want to show off your bias group here, share your pics in weekly videos, and join a vibrant Discord community with watch parties, custom emoji, and more, all you need to do is support Hallyu on Patreon. So first, I think it's important that I actually show my work for why I think something seems off with YG Entertainment. In other words, let's take a broad look at what's going on at YG and their sublabels in terms of their artists and their new music. At the main label, YG currently has 7 groups signed on who are technically active right now. Sechkies, Big Bang, Winner, iKON, ACMU, Blackpink, and Treasure. After a long hiatus, Sechkies reunited in 2016 as a group and signed on with YG Entertainment, and they actually had a very busy first 2 years. They released 8 different singles across 2 different albums, seeing a lot of success in keeping their brand going strong for older fans of K-pop. But since then, it's been really quiet for them. They had an EP at the start of 2020 and then 1 digital single in February of 2021, and that has been it. So while they were active a few years ago when their contract started, the past 4 years have been very quiet. Now on to Big Bang, who re-signed in March 2020 as 4 and announced plans to make new music at the time. Despite that, we actually haven't seen anything from the legendary boy group since their digital single Flower Road in 2018. The pandemic has no doubt thrown a wrench in some of their plans, but so many groups from other labels have released albums and digital singles during the pandemic era, so that's really not an excuse in my opinion. Now, Winner might just be the most obvious example to point to in all of this discussion because they debuted with a ton of momentum and success after the reality competition. And yet they experienced multiple long hiatuses between extremely big hits since their debut, and currently the group is on hiatus again due to members completing their military service. Now, I should say they did release an album in March of 2020 though with the singles Hold and Remember, but there's definitely been an issue with consistency with Winner's career. iKON have arguably had it worse though, because since January 2019, the boys have only had 2 EPs and 1 digital single. That is 3 singles in 3 years, which to me is baffling given how incredibly popular they became thanks to the smash hit Love Scenario. Not to mention the fact that they actually competed on Kingdom Legendary War and have not released any new music since their appearance on the show. Now, one bright spot for the label is definitely ACMU, who have been perennially successful artists. They of course had the extremely successful collaboration album this year, highlighted by the song Naka with IU, but in the 2 years prior to that, ACMU only had 1 digital single to bridge the gap between albums. And now let's talk about Blackpink. This is arguably the biggest K-pop girl group with million-selling albums, a Netflix special, and insane music video views. And yet, in the past 3 years, they've only released 1 album and 1 EP. Sure, there have been solos from Jennie, Rosé, and Lisa, but for comparison, in that same time frame, Twice has released 4 EPs and 4 studio albums. That is literally quadruple the music released. And again, to be clear, this is not on Blackpink at all. I'm just highlighting how baffling it is that YG are not giving these girls new music when new albums are basically a free money printer for the group. And lastly, there is Treasure, who despite being the new group in the label are already in a bit of a dry spell. After a really busy rookie year with the First Step Treasure Effect series of releases, we haven't seen a single new Korean song from them in an entire year since the song My Treasure. So after looking at all 7 of those groups, I think we're getting a pretty clear picture already, but let's take a quick peek at the sublabel situation as well, cause why not? Well, there was YGX, which carries Vinny and Anda as soloists, but as we found out last week, Anda actually left YG in 2021, so YGX is likely dead at this point. Then there was Side G, of course, which died when Side left YG in 2018 and founded P Nation on his own. High Ground also disappeared in 2018 when its founder Tableau left YG too. So I guess that just leaves the Black Label, the sublabel founded by producer Teddy and Kush. This seems to be the only one actually still going and doing well, as it's home to Hiru, Lauren, Zion T, Vince, and of course Jun So-mi, who had a great 2021. So aside from the Black Label, YG's collective discography has barely gotten any bigger in recent years, despite having 7 amazing groups. For a music label, they certainly aren't doing a good job giving their artists actual music, made even more baffling by how popular all of these 7 artists really are. But for longtime K-pop fans, this actually isn't as surprising as you might think, is it? Because I personally can remember back to 2014 or so when 2NE1 was a premier girl group selling absurdly well and making music constantly. And then, with 1 single drug scandal involving one of the members, boom, the group seemingly disintegrated thanks to YG sending them out on their solo careers and never bringing them back for an OT4 release again, aside from of course that legendary 2015 Mama performance. In my view, this was a big red flag in hindsight that we all missed, because it started a pattern of YG abandoning their artists no matter how successful and established they already were. I personally just cannot fathom their decision to give up hundreds of thousands in album sales that to anyone was basically guaranteed to pull in with any new comeback they had, and yet they did it. And the closer you look at the past 4 years or so at YG, you really start to get the idea that their CEO is captaining a rudderless ship. In 2017, there was the Mix 9 talent show, which was very successful on TV, and yet YG mysteriously scrapped the group that was formed out of it, never even letting them debut. With nothing to show for it after the group was scrapped, the show ended up costing YG 11 billion Korean won, making their stock price tank and causing them to drop to the third most valuable label as JYP Entertainment passed them by. As I mentioned, Psy also left the label in May of 2018 to found P Nation, meaning YG lost arguably the most recognizable name on their artist roster. And of course, there was the Burning Sun scandal, which sent huge ripples through YG Entertainment at all levels as accusations of corruption were thrown around on top of the accusations made specifically against Sunri. And if the reputation hadn't already been tarnished enough, YG's founder Young Hyun Suk himself was involved in another drug scandal with BI that is still going on to this day, causing him and his brother to both resign from all of their executive positions in 2019. And lastly, in May 2021, the Korea Exchange demoted YG Entertainment's stock from a blue chip classification down to a mid-sized business due to poor performance. Their return on equity at the time was negative 0.5%, and their music production and management has been operating at a loss since 2019. In fact, in 2021 alone, they lost 7.62 billion Korean won, or about 6.5 million US dollars. For comparison, in 2021, JYP Entertainment made 26.4 million US dollars in profits. So I think at this point the picture is starting to get pretty clear. We may not know the causes internally, but the symptoms are definitely showing themselves in a big way. As an entertainment label, YG is losing money, and they have been for the past 2 years. They have an absolute powerhouse roster of artists that includes Blackpink, Winner, iKON, and others, and yet there is a stunning lack of new music being released by the groups outside of various solo songs. So what could be going on here? Well, I'll put out a few hypotheses that I personally have, but I definitely want to hear from you as well on why you think YG isn't promoting their artists like other big labels are. My first hypothesis is that YG is trying to shift how they make money from their artists. Blackpink is definitely the most obvious example of this, where the group and the individual members have countless endorsements and brand deals for perfumes, cosmetics, modeling fashion lines, and more. But is that really more lucrative than having a balance of endorsements and music? I'm not an industry insider, but I would imagine these kinds of gigs pay out more money directly to the members than album sales would. And as we saw, YG's music business is operating at a loss, so if this is their strategy, I don't think it's working. It's almost like YG has forgotten what made their groups popular in the first place, their excellent music talent and their artistry. And not putting out consistent music while focusing on other money-making deals seems unsustainable to me. My second hypothesis is that YG's goal is actually to have their artists release more music more consistently, but the internal conflicts are causing major problems in getting projects across the finish line. Remember, both Young brothers resigned in 2019, so YG's executive leadership is fairly new in their roles. That, in combination with the recent scandals in the court proceedings, may be causing a lot of rifts internally, which might be made worse if the new leadership is making sweeping changes that are causing employees to take sides. To me, this is a pretty plausible scenario because, like I said earlier, at a high level it really does feel like YG is a rudderless boat at this point, kind of just going along with the current of the industry and doing the bare minimum to stay relevant. And my final hypothesis, which is kind of related to the previous one, is that YG is having staffing issues when it comes to actual music production. Teddy is definitely the most well-known producer at YG, and given how active and popular the Black Label artists have been in the past year, I have to wonder if he's trying to transition to exclusively working on his own sublabel. On paper, YG should have enough people they could tap in if they needed to, but with the pandemic, I'm sure a lot of that has changed dramatically too. So maybe the problem is simply that they don't have all the internal resources they're used to when it comes to actually producing new music for all of their artists, and they've hit a bottleneck with how much they can actually give each artist. As I said though, I would love to hear your thoughts on YG as a whole and what might be going on behind the scenes, because no matter what the causes actually are, there is no doubt that something is definitely up at YG Entertainment. As always, thank you so much for watching this deep dive, and if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss all the K-pop content coming your way right here at Hallyu. This has been Deep Dive number 87, What is going on at YG?